In an interview with American TV station Max News, Polish President Karol Nawrocki described what the response to further Russian provocations against Poland should look like.
Myself, as a commander-in-chief of the armed forces, believe that borders are sacrosanct. You cannot cross borders of other countries, be it by drone or by using an army. And this was also the discussion in the UN forum. If we allow foreign troops or foreign drones to fly within the borders of NATO, it means that another line will be crossed in international relations.
The president referred to the recent drone raid on Poland by the Kremlin. Karol Nawrocki declared if the Kremlin provocations, such as the drone raid on the country in early September, are repeated, the Polish military, in consultation with NATO allies, will respond and combat them.
Article 4 had to be invoked. After my suggestion, the Polish government and our allies made it happen. Article 4 was invoked, and I hope that this will be enough. Although we have to be preparing ourselves in these extraordinary times to stand together and to be able and ready to repel so far provocations of the Russian Federation, we hope that they will not translate or turn into a regular war.
Meanwhile, Russian provocations continue unabated. Once again, drones linked to Russia have appeared over Danish airports. According to Copenhagen, this is nothing less than part of a hybrid war against NATO.
Og hvor er vi nu?
Where are we now? First, we have raised the alert level and we are preparing for various scenarios. This means, among other things, that both the armed forces and the police will have anti-drone measures at their disposal and will be more present near critical infrastructure. At the same time, we remain in close contact with our allies to quickly strengthen Denmark's capabilities in detecting and combating drones. And the Danish services believe what is happening now may only be the beginning. We assess that the risk of Russian espionage and sabotage in Denmark is high. We have seen this in other parts of Europe. We must expect it. And it is obvious the authorities view these events in light of the intelligence and the picture of the situation that we have. According to unofficial information, the drones that appeared over airports in Denmark and Norway may be taking off from ships linked to Russia. There is talk that this operation may have been carried out by the shadow fleet used by Russia to smuggle or transport oil to avoid sanctions. At the time of the drone blockade of airports in Denmark, several ships of the Russian shadow fleet were in the area. Undoubtedly, Russia is testing how much we can afford as an alliance and what procedures will or will not work in countering such events. But that's not all. Yesterday evening, 5 Russian jets recklessly approached the Latvian border. They were intercepted by Hungarian Gripens protecting the airspace over the Baltic states. There is a reaction on the part of NATO. Russia is testing what else it can do to prevent this reaction from becoming more serious. We must be prepared for the possibility that there may come a moment when this reaction will have to be more decisive. We are talking here about intercepting an aircraft, perhaps forcing it to land, perhaps shooting it down. We must not wait passively and wonder how to respond, but give the Russian Federation a clear lesson. Take actions that are not provocative, but show NATO's strength and allow us to regain the strategic advantage. Following NATO, Europe is also beginning to wake up and recognize the threat posed by Putin's Russia.
They have not just accidentally violated the airspaces of EU member states, but this was an intentional violation of the European airspace. And here we see a clear pattern. Russia is testing the European borders, also probing our resolve and undermining our security.
We need a unified position from all the countries of the alliance, because then we will simply be stronger. Then we will have a clear message to Putin and to Russia. We are united. And perhaps this message can actually put an end to Putin's ambitions. We also asked Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk about Russian provocations against Poland and NATO. We all understand very well that there can be no more concessions or tolerance for violations of Polish territory, Polish airspace, or Polish borders. Enough is enough. And that is why we all want to be very well prepared for this. The time for preparations is long gone. Now is the time for action. The government has had nearly 2 years to respond to this issue. Unfortunately, it seems that there either has been no response at all, or the response has been far too modest in relation to the very real threat posed by Russia. Shoddy governance makes for good punchlines in peacetime, but could prove catastrophic in a wartime scenario. The Russians know this all too well. When Russian fighter jets violated Estonian airspace, even NATO commanders considered the possibility it was a mistake on the part of Russian pilots. This time, it was a clear provocation. 5 Russian fighter jets flew straight towards the NATO airspace border in the Baltic Sea, specifically the Latvian border. NATO fighter jets flew out to intercept the Russian intruders. The sequence of events in the Baltic region in recent weeks leaves no room for doubt. Russia has launched a campaign of diversion, harassment, and testing of NATO countries. This is part of what we experience every day. We are not at war, but we are no longer at complete peace either. We are under attack, hybrid attacks in the form of PSYOP campaigns and even drone invasions. This is the reality we face and must deal with. Germany is monitoring the movements of the so-called Shadow Fleet in the Danish Straits. According to some analysts, the drones that sabotaged airports in Denmark in recent days were most likely launched from one of these vessels. How can Russia be stopped? There are 2 options. Diplomacy has not worked, as American politicians in particular have repeatedly mentioned in recent days. Donald Trump has made it clear that, instead of mediation, it is time to support Ukraine decisively.
I've been watching the way what Russia's been doing. I'm very dissatisfied with what Russia's doing and what President Putin is doing. I haven't liked it at all. He's killing people for no reason whatsoever. And they are doing very poorly, considering they have put it all out on the line. Their economy is going to hell. They're bombing the hell out of everything, and they're picking up a very little territory, if any. In fact, they're losing some territory. So I think it's been very bad for the reputation of Russia.
The second option is sanctions, which the US is ready to impose immediately. However, NATO countries that buy oil and gas from Russia are standing in the way. The American sanctions would hit their allies in a perverse form of economic friendly fire. One such country is Turkey.
I didn't say, okay, you stop, but I believe you. I believe you will stop it, yeah. You know why? Because you can buy from a lot of other people.
Turkey is the only player that, while supporting NATO's actions, is ambiguous about the war in Ukraine. The Russians have been trying for years to win Erdogan over to their side. However, the Americans have an ace up their sleeve: military technology that Turkey wants to buy for its army.
We made a lot of deals.
However, the attitude of both Bratislava and Budapest remains puzzling. These countries could, if they wanted, supply their energy products from sources other than Russia, but choose not to. Polish President Karol Nawrocki spoke about this in an interview with the American channel Newsmax. The Russians are playing their own game. They are trying at all costs to blame the West for their own militaristic policy. According to the latest statement by the leading Russian propagandist, Sergei Lavrov, Russia is already at war with NATO and the European Union's member states. An example of neo-colonial ambitions is the crisis caused by the collective West in Ukraine, through which NATO and the European Union have already declared a real war on my country and are directly participating in it. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte responded to the words of the Russian foreign minister. He pointed out that these words mean as much as usual when spoken by Lavrov. That is, not much.
He's foreign minister of Russia, I think, since the birth of Jesus Christ. And since then, anything useful came out of his mouth. So let's not pay too much attention to Mr. Lavrov.
However, the USA is responding to the accelerating changes in the geopolitical situation. Following the completion of an audit of arms expenditure and military support for the US Army stationed around the world, the Secretary of War, head of the Pentagon, has convened a meeting for next week with all senior American officers, numbering nearly 800 generals and admirals, who are to report to the Marine Corps base in Quantico.
Germany believes that it was not Russia but Ukraine that blew up the Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 pipelines. German investigators have identified a group of 7 Ukrainians. The investigation into the explosion is entering an important phase. Serhii K., considered the leader of the 7-person commando, who was detained in Italy a month ago, is awaiting extradition to Germany. One of the suspects, Vsevolod K., is dead. He was killed fighting against the Russians on the front line. He was best known to the Germans because he had taken part in military training in Bavaria. Arrest warrants have been issued for the remaining 6. There is also a Polish angle to the German investigation. Our country was supposed to help one of the saboteurs, Volodymyr Z., who lived in Pruszków near Warsaw. The German prosecutor's office issued a European arrest warrant on June 21st, according to German media reports. It included his address in Pruszków. At dawn on July 6th, Volodymyr Z fled to Ukraine. According to German investigators, he crossed the border in a car with Ukrainian diplomatic license plates, driven by a military attaché. The Polish prosecutor's office later assured Reuters that the arrest warrant had reached it after July 6th. That's not all. As Rzeczpospolita learned from well-informed Polish sources, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski repeatedly said in conversations that he would be ready to grant Volodymyr Z asylum in our country and award him a medal. At the same time, the Polish authorities argue that nothing has been proven against Volodymyr Z, although they admit that he is one of the suspects. The role of our services in our country today should be to support the Germans in clarifying this matter. After all, we as Poland have nothing to do with it, and that is no secret. All these attempts, such as what was described in Rzeczpospolita, that Radosław Sikorski would like to award the person who was one of those responsible for the explosion, are unfortunately very harmful to our country. The explosion of the pipes at the bottom of the Baltic Sea in Poland and in the West was mainly attributed to the Russians, with one important exception when Radosław Sikorski, then a member of the European Parliament, thanked the Americans for the explosion. Thank you, USA. However, the entire Western world concluded that Russia itself blew up Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 in order to then accuse the West and have arguments in the hybrid war against NATO. American expert and former Navy SEAL Chuck Ferrer also believes that the Russians, not the Ukrainians, were behind such a complex operation as blowing up the underwater pipelines. Vladimir Putin has called the allegation that a pro-Ukrainian group sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline as complete nonsense. This narrows the suspect list considerably to a state actor, like, say, the Russian Navy. This is an important opinion, because Chuck Ferrer has repeatedly demonstrated on TV Republica that he has extensive knowledge of the Russian Navy. The Russians have a device that prevents swimming, namely a hand grenade launcher. It has a range of 250 to maybe 300 meters. This grenade was their last chance, and again, because it was designed against floating objects, this grenade explodes underwater. He himself spent years in the U.S. Navy SEALs, professionally involved in blowing up underwater pipelines. During the Cold War, his job was simply to blow up this type of installation. He blew up a lot of them and described it many times. I spoke to him about it several times, and he explained to me in every possible way that it cannot be done from a yacht, because the operation is simply too complicated. And it was from the deck of a yacht, according to the Germans, that the Ukrainians carried out the sabotage, while the Polish authorities allegedly ignored the disappearance of recordings from cameras at the port of Kołobrzeg, where the commando has docked the rented vessel Andromeda. I have no doubt that this case related to the investigation into the Nord Stream explosion is intended to involve us, Poland, in this whole story, which is very harmful for us, for our country, and it will be used by the Germans to weaken our position, and thus strengthen their position. Shifting the blame onto Ukraine and Poland is absolutely in their best interest. What's more, they would be very keen to rebuild this gas pipeline, because they were supposed to be the hub for Russian gas for the whole of Europe. The war and what happened afterwards put an end to that. Many German politicians do not even hide such plans. Here is a post from last year by one of them. Gerhard Schröder turns 80 today. As Chancellor, he was an advocate of a strategic partnership with Russia and paved the way for Nord Stream, the foundation of our industry. His life's work will one day be completed. I warmly congratulate the former Chancellor on his birthday. Germany always has common interests with Russia, and it always seems that they are against our homeland. We must defend ourselves here by all possible means, so as not to be maneuvered into such stupidity, such idiocy. But let's remember one thing. Apart from the fact that we have the Germans and the Soviets, we also have Radosław Sikorski, who has always written strange things and said strange things, such as his post about Thank You USA in relation to the Nord Stream explosion. If we have such a trio, then they are really sounding the alarm, especially since the German investigation is gaining momentum. One of the 7 Ukrainians identified by the Germans has been arrested in Italy. He is awaiting awaiting extradition and faces 15 years in prison. However, it is possible that the Germans will offer him a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony, perhaps including testimony incriminating Poland. Moldova will hold a parliamentary election on Sunday, September 28th, that could have sweeping consequences for its bid to join the European Union. There is already enough evidence of malign Russian interference in Moldova's election.
Well, we are 7 members of the European Parliament from 5 political groups from 5 different countries, and we are observing the election day, and in the run-up thereto, we are getting immense information on the developments thus far. And on election day, the purpose is to see whether the conduct is held in line with the international obligations of Moldova and its domestic legislation. There is ample evidence already now that a lot of malign interference from Russia is taking place, and we'll see how that works out on the results as well.
On Friday, election officials in Moldova barred a pro-Russian party from standing in Sunday's parliamentary election, a move that threatens to raise tensions ahead of the high-stakes vote. The decision by the Central Election Committee to exclude Heart of Moldova, part of the pro-Russian Patriotic Bloc, followed a court ruling limiting the party's activity for 1 year. Sunday's poll could have sweeping consequences for Moldova, whose pro-European government has warned of extensive Russian-backed efforts to sway the vote and derail Chisinau's bid to join the European Union.